Today I'm here to talk to you about a problem that is so deeply entwined with our culture as Americans. There is a harsh reality behind a practice that is so deeply rooted in our lives: grocery shopping. When we need something, we have the privilege of choosing from a variety of grocery stores that are readily available to us. But what is lesser known is that these grocery stores that we buy from weekly, if not daily, take part in inhumane practices behind the scenes. Through my theology class, I have been introduced to these malpractices of corporate grocery stores that we all know and love, like Walmart and Kroger. These are stores that we have been supporting since we were younger without truly knowing the company's intentions. I have also had the privilege of getting to know this topic through an immersive learning trip to Apopka, Florida that I recently took. During this trip, I took a deeper look at agricultural jobs in America and the dire need for workers' protection in these fields. I have decided to talk to you all today about the corruption throughout corporate grocery stores because now that I have the information from my trip, I understand that it's my duty and that I owe it to those agricultural worker communities to share their stories and to get this known. I also think it's important that you know that where your hard-earned money is going to when you support these stores. It is your right to know where your money is going and what it is supporting indirectly. I hope that after this presentation, you will have more knowledge about the grocery store industry and you can make an informed decision about who you want to support. To reiterate, I will walk you through the history of the supply companies that these large grocery stores like Walmart and Kroger buy from, and policies that protect workers and the environment in result of the negative effects of these grocery stores, like the Whistleblower Protection Act and carbon tax. And lastly, it is my goal to explain the environmental impacts of these grocery stores and what you personally can do. To begin, it is extremely important to understand the history behind these large supply companies that grocery stores buy from. Looking at the background information of these supply companies will allow us to see where our grocery stores are getting their products from. One of the most common produce supply companies that I'm sure many of you are aware of is the United Fruit Company, which is now more commonly known as the Chiquita Bananas. The United Fruit Company dates back to the early 1900s. It's important to learn about this history because it's relatively corrupt and these grocery stores are still supporting it. The United Fruit Company was started by Minor Coop Keith, Lorenzo Dow Baker, and Andrew Preston. These are American men who started a banana plantation in Guatemala, and because of the plantation's rapid growth, they then gained power in the Guatemalan government. Bananas were just being introduced to Americans, and because of their exotic nature, they were in high demand. So the company grew and started to take up large portions of land in Guatemala. This was a huge contribution to the U.S.'s economy, but at the cost of Guatemalan people. Because of the land being taken up by the American plantations, there was little land left for the Guatemalan people. And if the people of Guatemala were employed by the United Fruit Company, oftentimes they had no workers' protection and the conditions that they worked under were relatively deadly and considerably named slavery. That's controversial opinion, but looking at these conditions, it's very similar to the slavery we know from the South and before the Civil War era. That being said, this later led to a huge revolt among the Guatemalan people because of the unjust nature that they were being treated. This was the start of the Guatemalan Civil War, and because of the revolt among the people, there was a democratic president elected in Guatemala, and this Guatemalan president called for a complete redistribution of the land in Guatemala. This was Jacobo Arbenz, who was put in office by the people, and Arbenz saw that this was so destructive to the people, and so, again, like I said, called for a complete redistribution of the land. This was damaging to the United Fruit Company because that meant that they were losing millions of acres in land, which affected their revenue. America saw this as extremely damaging and called it an act of communism because of the damage to United Fruit's revenue. And so President Eisenhower authorized the CIA to forcefully make Arbenz, the Guatemalan Democratic president, to resign. this was just one example of how the corrupt history of fruit supply companies. Another example is in the late 1800s in Hawaii, when the Hawaiian kingdom was forced to sign a contract stripping away their power as a monarchy by America. The American industry formed plantations in Hawaii to utilize their rich resources and the ability to grow pineapples and sugar. America saw this as a perfect opportunity for economic growth, but once again, at the cost of Hawaiian people. And so before Hawaii became a territory and then a state, American business people had a problem with the royalty of the island and forced Hawaii's queen into prison, then forced the Bayonet Constitution among the Hawaiian people at gunpoint. This is where the fruit company that we all know, Dole, comes into play. Dole is a pineapple brand that is still being sold in grocery stores like Walmart today. Stanford Dole led the American government's involvement in Hawaii until Dole was named the president of the Republic of Hawaii, and his business, Dole Food Company, would thrive. Despite these still being companies and large suppliers would buy from, I understand that these might seem like far-off examples because of how dated both the Dole Fruit Company example and the Guatemalan involvement with Chiquita banana brand. These are dated examples, yet they're still being bought in grocery stores like Kroger and Walmart. That being said, a more recent example of the maltreatment of workers in supply companies that are being supported by Walmart still is the Thai Union Shrimp Company, which in 2015, Walmart was under investigation for supporting them because of the company's use of slave labor to peel their shrimp. So this is a huge issue that the food we are purchasing is at the extent of other human beings. To continue, despite the inhumane practices of workers' rights and lack of worker protection in these supply companies, there's also a huge environmental impact that these supply companies and grocery stores are contributing. Since the products being sold in our grocery stores come from super far away, like bananas in Guatemala, pineapples in Hawaii, and shrimp in Thailand, this requires a detrimental damage to our environment done on the part of transportation. The vehicles that are being used to transport these products have a huge carbon dioxide emission, which is currently the lead gas in global warming. The plantations that the products are being grown on are also a lead cause of deforestation and wetland destruction in the world. To continue, there's also an intensive agrochemical application being done to these products and a lack of erosion control among the plantations. Something that would protect this and prevent this is a carbon tax. This is a policy that is important, and these protection against the emissions would greatly benefit our environment. I urge you all to take a deeper look at what is happening in these grocery stores. Next time you are preparing to go shopping, think about the knowledge that you now carry about the history of the supply companies that your grocery stores are supporting. Think about the lives who put the work in to get your food on the shelves. There is not currently one policy that encompasses both the environmental negative effects and the lack of workers' protection, but as I mentioned earlier, the Whistleblower Protection Act is one policy that greatly protects employees in these circumstances. This act allows employees to report malpractices being done in their working conditions without the risk of unemployment, and a carbon tax would once again tax companies for their carbon dioxide emissions, which would positively protect our environment. On a smaller scale, that's not advocating for large policies. There are things that we can do in our own community. Instead of choosing to go to somewhere like Walmart and Kroger, I urge you to look into smaller businesses and local grocers. One way to do this is to support local crop shares. Crop shares are basically a family who owns a farm. You purchase a portion of their harvest and you would receive that produce while supporting that local farm. This not only teaches us on how to eat seasonal produce, which is good for our bodies, but it supports local farmers and allows you to not give your money to large corporate grocery stores. Some examples of these crop shares in Cincinnati include Urban Earth Farms, Wildwood Flora, and Right Ridge Urban Eco Village Farm Project CSA, and Urban Greens. If you do not have access to a crop share, another example of buying produce from a sustainable and humane organization is farmers markets. Staying away from Findlay Market because of their impact on gentrification being done in their area, but targeting and looking at markets in Cincinnati that are humane include Hyde Park Farmers Market, North Side Farmers Market, College Hill Farmers Market. I specifically did not mention Findlay again because of the involvement in gentrification in that area. It is so important that we support small businesses that grow their produce instead of buying it from corporate chains. In conclusion, I have discussed the history of some of the corporate supply companies that large grocery store companies like Kroger and Walmart support, and how that negatively affects the environment, and finally what you can do with that knowledge and some local grocers that you can support. I presented you with these positive alternatives, and I understand that it is hard to learn about the corruption and that oftentimes it's extremely inconvenient to us. But I want to reiterate that it is harder and it is more inconvenient for the people who are living within these unjust working conditions. And we owe it to them now that we have the knowledge to protect them and become their allies.